Welcome to the new frontier of space. Just kidding, we're still in Unreal, which is still a pretty cool universe if you ask me. So the next thing we're going to do in these videos is we're going to take this little scene here of a planet. Awesome, we're moving to a new type of example. And I'm going to show you material layers. But I'm also going to teach you how to use material functions. Both of these things are more advanced and a little bit more complicated to set up, especially for first-time users. But that's what I'm here for. I'm going to make it easier for you. So material layers are pretty cool. Material layers are in fact material functions. So if I teach you about material layers, you're going to learn about material functions at the same time. So two birds with one stone. I'm going to go to the content browser and create a new material. And if you remember, that's pretty easy. Just right click, go to material, and give your new material a name. I'm going to call this planet_map. I like to put MAT at the end. That's just my personal naming convention for materials. So I'll apply this material to our little planet here in Unreal. And if I go to the material itself, right now it's got nothing. It doesn't have textures, doesn't have anything. So I'm just going to undo the applying of the material to the planet there, because we're not ready to apply this yet or anything like that. We've got a lot of work to do actually setting up these different material layers and stuff like that. So if I open up the material here in the material editor, I can see it doesn't have anything, obviously. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click, I'm going to go down to materials and textures and select material function. And that's a totally different thing. And I'm going to call this planet underscore, and you can call it any number of things. Off the top of my head, I'll just call it mat. So this is going to be planet mat. If I double click on this material function, it's going to open up basically a material editor for it, which should look pretty familiar because it's pretty much the same as a regular material editor, except this is not a material, it's a material function. Now don't worry about what that means, it's just kind of semantics. Not really, but just for now, don't worry about it. So this is a material function, and it looks a little bit different than a regular material. All we have is a node called output result. And what in the world does that mean? We're going to figure it out in a second. I'm going to go over here and grab myself a make material attributes node. And this should look kind of familiar. It looks like a regular material node. We're going to plug the results of this into the output result. Okay, you can't delete the output result. You need that. Now you're going to see some stuff up here. It says missing function output result. That's because we need to plug something into the output result node. That's that purple blue node over there. And now we have base color, we've got metallic, specular, all this stuff that we can plug stuff into. So essentially we're creating a material just as we normally would. Just things work a little bit different, and we'll see how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some texture maps that I made. I've got a diffuse color, I've got a normal map, I've got a roughness map. I'm going to grab all of these guys from the content browser, and I'm going to bring them in. And if you're wondering how I created this stuff, I just jumped into ZBrush real quick and did a quick like 5-minute sculpting session. Sculpted out a so-called planet, not very detailed and stuff, but I just needed something for an example. So I sculpted something real quick. I baked out some maps with XNormal, which is a free tool that allows you to create normal maps and diffuse maps off of vertex colors and all kinds of stuff to do this. Anyway, that's outside the scope of this tutorial. So I'm going to plug my diffuse map into the base color, roughness into roughness, and normal into normal, of course. And now we can see that we have this weird looking object over here, this strange excuse for a planet. Anyway, the whole point is to show you how this works, not to wow you with crazy art. So I'm going to move this off over here. Now we still have our metallic and our specular nodes over here. Now this thing looks shiny. I don't want to make this look too shiny. So this material is not supposed to be shiny. I'm going to plug this constant 1 parameter into the specular, and it's set to 0, and that makes the object very matte. Mattes the obvious the opposite of something that's shiny. So I'm going to call this specular, just to keep things organized. I like to name stuff because these shader networks can get pretty big, and it's pretty smart to name your stuff. So I'm going to change the value to 1, and we can see that this gets shiny and we're spreading out that specular highlight quite a bit. And the idea here is just to create a material as you normally would. So creating a multiply node here. I'm going to go ahead and plug my roughness map into it. And the reason I'm doing this setup here for the roughness is so that I can control the amount of roughness. So I'll plug this into the roughness. I'll take this constant 1 parameter. You can see we have this kind of sparkly, very shiny, weird looking look to our object. So I'm going to take the roughness and set it to 1. But I can overdrive that. I'm going to set it to 2, and you can see what we have. This looks a lot rougher and less shiny. But we still have a little bit of shininess, which still looks cool. I mean, everything in real life is shiny, so you want to make sure you have a little bit of that. But in this case, I want to make sure that it's as little as possible without completely killing the effect. So I'll probably set it to like 3. That seems to be a pretty decent value. Now, if I right-click on it to turn it into a parameter, you'll notice that I don't have that option. That's because you can't parameterize nodes with a material function. But essentially, in the end, that's what I'm going to want. I'm going to want the functionality of a parameter. So I've created that material function, which is essentially sort of a material. I'll go to the main material over here. And let's go ahead and drag and drop the material function into the main material. So here we have a material function, which is blue, and it's called Planet Matte because of course that's what I called it. And right now it only has a pin called result, and that's it. So we're basically encapsulating this this material right here that you see, this material function, into a node that we can drop into our main material. So I'm going to go over here and grab myself a function input node. And this is going to be this weird looking green node over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to parameterize the material, or sort of parameterize the material. We're not really parameterizing, but it'll make a lot of sense in a moment. I'm going to take that number 3 node, I'm going to plug it into the preview, and the reason I use the preview is because it allows you to do just that. You can preview what your material looks like. So I can see that I have a value of 3 going into the roughness here. And I'm going to take this input node, which is a vector 3. And if I look over here, now I have this input called in v3. The v3 just means it's a vector 3, so you can ignore that. Now if I go to the input name and change the name to something else, like roughness, which makes sense because this controls the roughness in my material setup, if I apply these changes, save everything, and go back to the main material, you're going to notice now that the input changed from in, which was the default, to roughness. So try to guess what I'm going to be doing with this setup or how this stuff works. Maybe it's starting to make a little bit of sense. Anyway, I'm going to take a 1 vector, which I'm going to make it a 3, which is what looked good in my material function, and apply to the roughness. And that's going to give me the same sort of material setup that I have here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the texture here, and I'm going to desaturate it because I don't like the way it looks with that color. And I'm going to use this desaturation node basically to turn it black and white by plugging in number 1 to the function. And I'm going to plug this to the base color, and this desaturates my texture. Very similar to using desaturation in something like, say, Photoshop. Okay? So now my texture is desaturated, and this looks gray. It looks kind of like the moon or something like that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a multiply node here, and I'm going to connect this with a constant 3 vector, so a color. I want to be able to change the color of the texture So that's why I created a color node. But I'm going to plug this color to a function input. And I'm going to plug that into the multiply. And essentially what that's going to do is if I change the name to color, and I go ahead and I'm going to change this color to something else. It could really be anything you want. I'm going to choose something like a yellowish sort of desaturated color. Almost a white. I'm going to plug that into the base color. So now I've desaturated the color and now I'm multiplying it by a new color, which gives me a new color or a new look to the base color. I'm going to come down here and look at this roughness. I'll probably leave that alone. Let me see what else I want to do to this. Okay, so I've got these two input nodes. One's called color and the other's called roughness. If I come back to the main material, you'll notice that now I have a color input. And this is the color here that I'm using. If I jump back over here, I can plug in a color, but I'll have to choose the same color again, which is kind of redundant. So the smart thing to do is to copy and paste the node. You can just jump into the material function, copy the color, and paste it using Control-C and Control-V. And that allows me to work a little bit faster because I don't have to create a new color node and try to choose the same color again. Maybe I won't get it exactly right. So copying and pasting is the sure way of making sure you'll keep things consistent. Okay, so now with that done, we've pretty much exposed the color parameter and exposed the roughness parameter into the main material. So if I come over here, I'm going to go to the content browser. I'm going to take this planet matte material. I'm going to right click and go to duplicate because we want to make a copy of this. And I'm going to call this mf_planet, and I'm going to make a copy of this guy. I like to put mf before the material name. That way I immediately know it's a material function when I'm kind of scanning with my eyes through the content browser. So I have a copy of the material function. So this material, the reason I made a copy was because I want to make a different version of this material function that behaves a little bit differently, but I didn't want to have to build a new material function from scratch. That's very redundant work and kind of a waste of time. So I'll change the color of this guy to like a blue, just for the sake of the example. So now my planet's turned this weird blue color. Okay, so I'm just kind of playing with the colors here. You really don't have to waste so much time changing the colors or adjusting them or any of that stuff. But the cool thing is we can basically make a copy here of our material function, change the look and the behavior of the surface properties. For example, I'll take the roughness and set it to something like 0.2, and I can make this very shiny and look reflective and all that stuff. So it looks different from the original material function. So this version is going to be a little bit more specular. It's going to be a lot shinier. So I'm going to take the specular parameter and set it to something like 0.2, something like that looks pretty good. So I get this kind of sparkly, very shiny look to this. More like ocean surface or something like that. And let me see, what else can I do to this? If I wanted to, I could plug something into metallic. Not sure if I really want to do that. Kind of the fun with working with materials is doing look development with them and just testing different things out. So let's plug a new function input into the metallic node. And what I'm going to do is plug in a constant 1 into the preview here. And let me change the name of the input to metallic because obviously that's my metallic setting. And I'm going to change the number to 1. And that's going to give me this really weird kind of polished metal looking surface to my strange alien planet here. How crazy would it be to be in the future working for NASA and you go to some faraway planet and it looks like that? That'd be pretty insane. So I'm going to change that to metallic. It's set to 0.5. This guy down here controls our roughness, and that's set to 0.2. This is the color, so I'm just going to type in color, which makes sense. And again, I like to use names that are logical, short, simple, straight to the point, and make sense. I'm going to change the desaturation on the texture to about 0.75 and apply the changes. Let me see if there's anything else I want to do to this. Probably, maybe not. So I'm going to go back to the content browser, and here's my second material function, the one called Planet Shiny. So I have two, Planet Matte, which is not shiny, and then Planet Shiny, which of course is shiny. So I'll drag and drop Planet Shiny into the main material here for my planet, and I have three inputs. I have color, I've got roughness, and I've got metallic. So what I'm going to do is jump back into the material function, grab all of those parameters like the color, the amount of metallic and roughness, hit Control-C to copy, and then hit Control-V to paste into the main material. That way I don't have to create this stuff from scratch and then go back and forth and try to memorize the numbers and stuff like that. So I'll plug in the color, plug in the metallic, the roughness, and now my material function should be looking exactly as it looked back in the material function editor. Pretty cool. So that's pretty much going to do it for this video. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off here, and we'll continue this in the next video.